All right, strap in, everyone, because this time on the deep dive, we're heading into Jurassic Park territory.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, but not the dinosaurs themselves this time.
Oh.
We're diving deep into a character. His name's Marcos Shannon, a paleontologist working for, you guessed it, InGen.
And I'm guessing from the stack of files you've got there, it's a pretty complex picture we're going to try and put together.
That's what makes it so fascinating, right? Trying to figure out what makes this guy tick.
Yeah, totally. Analyzing a character like this, it's almost like paleontology itself, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We've got these fragments, little pieces of his life, and we're trying to reconstruct, a complete picture of who Marcos is.
A psychological dig, if you will.
I like that. Okay, so let's unpack this. Right away, there's one thing that really jumps out at me. Marcos's ambition.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
This guy's buying equipment before he even officially gets the job at Jurassic Park. He's talking about surpassing the big names in paleontology, Dr. Dupre. You get the sense that he's not just aiming for success. He wants to be the best.
Yeah. And that ambition, I think, is really key here. It's a driving force pushing him forward, but it could also be a source of conflict, maybe even a weakness.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it makes him willing to take risks, push boundaries, but you can see how it might lead to clashes with others.
Especially with someone like Dr. Dupre, right, who represents the established order, the way things have always been done.
Yeah, for sure. And their interactions, you can really feel that tension. It's like he's constantly trying to prove himself, not just to them, but maybe even to himself.
There's an element of insecurity there, maybe. Like he needs that validation to feel worthy.
Could be. And speaking of proving himself, you got to talk about all the danger this guy seems to find. I mean, close calls with dinosaurs, encounters with mercenaries, it's kind of crazy.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is he a thrill seeker? Is there something subconsciously drawing him to these dangerous situations? Or is he just plain unlucky? A normal human response to fear. But then as we move through the sources, something changes.
Yeah, like he becomes more assertive. Like during the Mamenchisaurus stampede, he takes charge, puts himself at risk to save others, almost like he's become, desensitized to the danger.
Right, and that's what's fascinating, right? How repeated exposure to trauma can literally change a person. His brain might be almost rewired in how it responds to fear now.
That's heavy. So we've got this ambitious, risk-taking paleontologist who's basically a magnet for danger.
Sounds like a movie in the making.
Right. But what about his relationships with other people?
Yeah.
Because that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. This is where that ambition, that drive to be the best, might be causing some friction, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically about his dynamic with Dr. Dupre. There's this constant tension there, a rivalry that goes beyond just professional competition, don't you think?
Yeah, it's more than that. It's like they represent two different philosophies, two generations clashing.
You can really sense it in their conversations, the way they talk to each other, even in these short excerpts we have.
There's this underlying resentment, I think, like they're constantly trying to one-up each other.
So we've got this early setback, this huge ambition. Now let's talk about the people in his life. Because the sources, they're packed with names. Shannon Moore, Terrence McTaylor, Emma Beckett.
Right, and these aren't just colleagues, are they? These are some seriously complex relationships.
Exactly. So what can we learn about Marcos through these connections?
Well, I think they're crucial to understanding him, really. Let's start with Shannon Moore. She's a paleobotanist, and their relationship, well, it's complicated.
Complicated good, complicated bad.
Both, honestly. One minute they're at each other's throats, the next they're... Well, one source even mentions her saving his life from a Carnotaurus on Isla Sorna.
Whoa, wait, hold on. A Carnotaurus attack?
Yep. Sounds like a close call.
That's more than a close call. That had to create some kind of bond between them. That initial connection they had kind of went south after that incident with Chewat Garland, didn't it?
It definitely did.
Right. We see Marcos walking in on them. It looks like a fight, maybe something more. It's ambiguous.
Very much so. And from that point on, there's this undeniable tension between them, but neither of them ever explicitly addresses it.
It's like this giant elephant in the room, and they just keep dancing around it.
And what's interesting is how Marcos reacts. He seems to be pushing her away, even though earlier there were signs of, maybe something more.
Yeah, you can sense that initial attraction, but then it's like he hits the brakes hard.
A constant push and pull between them. You see distrust, conflicting goals, and yet they keep ending up in situations where they have to work together.
Forced to rely on each other almost.
Exactly. That scene with the forced kiss on the monorail, that just sums them up perfectly, I think.
He's basically a human shield, and you can tell he's both annoyed and kind of impressed by her resourcefulness.
Oh, for sure. And then there's the way he teases her about Shivak.
Always pushing her buttons. But at the same time, he clearly recognizes her skills, sees her as a highly skilled spy, even if he doesn't always trust her motives.
Yeah. It's a fascinating mix of suspicion and begrudging respect. Like, they're constantly trying to outmaneuver each other. Do you think it's possible Marcos is pushing her away, even though there were hints of attraction earlier on?
Yeah, maybe. It's like he doesn't know how to handle those feelings, so he just shuts down.
Could be a defense mechanism, avoiding vulnerability, protecting himself from getting hurt.
Yeah. And that makes you wonder if his tendency to be, well, blunt, speak his mind without thinking, might be part of the reason his relationships are so strained.
I mean, he's so focused on the science, the mission, that he forgets there are actual people involved with their own feelings.
Right. It's all about the task at hand. He definitely seems more comfortable with, dinosaurs and scientific theories than with emotions and relationships.
Absolutely. And that avoidance, that inability to deal with those messy feelings, it might be impacting all of his relationships, even with his colleagues.
Oh, totally. Think about his rivalry with Dr. Dupre, that constant clash of egos and approaches. They just rub each other the wrong way.
Yeah, it's like they're from different worlds, right? Dupre's the old guard, relying on years of research, published papers, that kind of thing.
And Marcos is the upstart, the rebel, who wants to shake things up, do things differently.
He's all about hands-on experience, pushing boundaries, getting his hands dirty, literally.
And he's not afraid to let Dupre know it. Remember that scene where they're arguing about dinosaur migration patterns? And Marcos is like, well, I've got living specimens to study. Boom, mic drop.
Huh. Yeah, he definitely doesn't hold back. And then there's Terrence McTaylor. He's like Marcos's second in command, very steady, reliable, maybe a good counterbalance to Marcos's more impulsive side,
Okay, so we have this intense life-or-death connection with Shannon, a steady presence in Terrence. Who else was there?
Emma Beckett, a ranger. Marcos really admired her.
Admired her, okay.
But things get messy when he finds out she's dating Shivak Garland.
Garland, yeah. The name keeps popping up, and not in a good way.
Marcos deeply distrusts him.
Talk about a whole other level of conflict. That's not just tension, it's outright hostility.
Yeah, no kidding. Shivak is brutal, cruel and abusive towards Marcos, even resorting to torture, which is just...
Ugh, I know. That torture scene is tough to read.
It's hard to stomach, for sure, but it really shows you the depths of Shivak's depravity. And at the same time, you see Marcos's strength.
He just refuses to break, even in the face of that kind of pain, that kind of cruelty.
Amazing, isn't it? And it just makes him more determined to expose Shivak, to bring him down.
Absolutely, to shine a light on all those corrupt dealings. This makes me think about his relationship with Cole Hudson.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It's pretty tense, right? Almost like there's some kind of rivalry going on.
Yeah, you could say that.
That confrontation between them. Whoa.
Talk about a turning point. Marcos just lets loose, blaming Cole for Emma Beckett's death.
So raw. So much anger and pain in that scene.
Yeah.
You can tell how deeply disillusioned Marcos is with Cole.
It's heartbreaking in a way. You get the sense that Marcos saw something in Cole, maybe even a potential ally, but ultimately he feels let down, betrayed even.
And those shattered expectations, that's just fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. It really is. It boils down to a clash of ideals, Marcos has this very clear sense of right and wrong, and Cole just doesn't measure up.
Which brings us to Alina Moldovan. And this one is interesting because we don't get a lot of direct interaction between them.
Right. It's more subtle. Like, we have to read between the lines a bit.
But there are hints of a connection, wouldn't you say?
It makes you wonder what their dynamic would be like if we saw more of them together.
Yeah. Would they clash? Or would they find common ground and team up? We can only speculate. But it's interesting. With Alina Moldovan, it's a completely different vibe.
It is. It's more collaborative, based on mutual respect, a shared passion for, the science.
They actually seem to enjoy working together, bouncing ideas off each other.
And there's trust there. He values her expertise, and she appreciates his willingness to challenge the status quo, to think outside the box.
Remember that scene where he finds something strange in the Tylosaurus breeding records?
Yeah.
He immediately calls Alina to come check it out.
Exactly. It shows a level of trust and respect that's missing in his other professional relationships.
But even with Alina, there are these moments of, awkwardness.
Yeah, those clumsy attempts at compliments, like... He wants to connect on a more personal level, but he just doesn't know how.
He's so much more comfortable with facts and figures than with, emotions and social cues.
It's like he's trying to solve a complex equation instead of just being himself.
That's a great analogy. But then there's this one event that throws everything into a whole new light, the death of Brandon Colombs.
Oh, yeah, that incident with the Mosasaurus, it's a turning point for sure.
It's tragic. And Marcos's reaction, it's unusual.
Yeah, that inappropriate laughter, the dark jokes, it's almost jarring, right?
Like, is that a coping mechanism?
Yeah.
A way to distance himself from the pain and guilt?
Could be. But then later when he's being interrogated, there's that outburst where he keeps repeating, I killed him. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, you can really feel the weight of that trauma, that guilt eating away at him. But does that actually work? I mean, is that a healthy way to deal with trauma?
Well, humor can be a powerful tool, that's for sure. It can create some distance, offer a temporary escape from, really intense emotions.
Right, like a pressure valve?
Exactly. But it can also be a double-edged sword. If it becomes the primary way of coping, it might actually prevent him from processing those emotions fully,
So he's burying it, not really dealing with it head on.
It seems that way, and that kind of fits with what we've seen of his personality so far, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
It's a reminder that even the most seemingly fearless individuals have their breaking points, their vulnerabilities.
So we've got this ambitious, risk-taking, sometimes insensitive character who's now wrestling with some serious trauma and guilt.
It's a lot. But is that all there is to Marcos? Is he just this collection of flaws and vulnerabilities?
That's the big question, isn't it?
There's a lot more to uncover, that's for sure. His relationships, his reactions to the escalating chaos, the mysteries surrounding InGen.
Action over introspection, that's Marcos in a nutshell.
Right.
And then we've got Lola Vandenberg.
Okay.
She's a video documentarian,
right,
brand new to InGen.
And with her, we see a totally different side of Marcos. At first, he's dismissive of her, sees her as an outsider, someone who doesn't really understand the dangers they're facing.
Yeah, he's like, what is this filmmaker doing in my lab?
Exactly. But then they're thrown together in these increasingly perilous situations, and a bond starts to develop.
The sheer danger, the adrenaline, it forces them to rely on each other, to see past their initial judgments.
And they start to recognize each other's strengths.
Yeah.
Lola's got this resilience, this ability to stay calm under pressure. And Marcos, well, he's got the courage and the knowledge to navigate these dangerous environments.
There's that scene where he's protecting her from giant spiders. It's intense. And it seems to crack open something in him emotionally.
He starts to let his guard down, to open up to her in a way he hasn't with anyone else.
He talks about his guilt over Brandon's death, his frustration with InGen, his longing for, a simpler life.
And Lola, she just listens without judgment, offering compassion and understanding.
It's a side of him we haven't really seen before, this vulnerability, this willingness to let someone in.
And it seems to be having a positive effect on him, wouldn't you say? He's less abrasive, more willing to collaborate with others.
Yeah, there's a shift. It's like Lola is showing him that it's okay to be vulnerable, to let down his guard, and to connect with someone on a deeper level.
Maybe that's what he's been missing all along. Real connection, not just chasing the next discovery or proving himself to the world.
So Lola could be the catalyst for some real growth and change in Marcos.
She could be.
So we've got loyalty, admiration, distrust. Definitely a lot going on. But what does all this tell us about Marcos himself? What are his motivations, especially within these relationships?
Well, first, there's that obvious thirst for knowledge. The guy's passionate about paleontology. I mean, really passionate, always pushing boundaries, always going the extra mile. Look at his research on Isla Sorna.
Right. He wasn't just there to punch a clock.
No way. He was meticulous, went way beyond his assigned duties.
So it's more than a job for him. It's like this deep-seated need to uncover the truth about these creatures.
Absolutely. And, thinking back to that early humiliation he experienced, maybe this drive for knowledge is also fueled by a desire to prove himself, right?
Yeah, like he's trying to make up for that past failure.
Exactly. And it's not just knowledge, it's loyalty, too.
Right. We see that strong loyalty with all these people, even if the relationships are complicated.
For sure.
But do you think that loyalty ever backfires on him? I mean, could it be blinding him to potential dangers? Like with the Shivak Garland character, for instance.
That's a great question. And it's something we should definitely explore as we go deeper into these sources. Because one thing's for sure, Marcos has a knack for finding trouble.
Oh, he definitely does.
Yeah, like a magnet for it. He really does. It's not even that he finds it. It's more like trouble finds him. And, that fierce loyalty we were just talking about, it could be part of the problem.
Yeah, you're right. It's like he's a magnet for chaos. And that impulsiveness, It seems to pop up again and again,
Yeah.
like with his research on Isla Sorna.
Oh, absolutely. He definitely went above and beyond there.
But he also put himself in danger, right?
Yeah.
Venturing into uncharted territory, no backup.
All on his own. Classic Marcos.
And let's not forget that time he went head-to-head with Ed Regis.
Oh, yeah. About the dangers on Isla Venthua.
He just wouldn't let it go, even though Regis obviously wanted to keep it all under wraps.
He just couldn't stand by and let it happen.
It's like he can't help himself. He sees something wrong and he has to act. Consequences be damned.
That's a good point. It's not just recklessness, it's a sense of justice. He can't stand to see injustice.
Right. So we've got this thirst for knowledge, a need to redeem himself, incredible loyalty, and now this unwavering sense of justice. But I still feel like we're missing something. What is it about this guy that makes him such a lightning rod for trouble?
Well, remember all those relationships we talked about? Shalyn, Emma, even this mysterious Shivak Garland.
Yeah.
They all seem to be at the heart of a lot of the trouble Marcos finds himself in.
With his insatiable curiosity, his need to find the truth, he just stumbles right into the middle of it all.
He can't resist a mystery, can he?
No, he can't. It's like he's not just chasing dinosaurs anymore.
Yeah.
He's stumbled onto something much bigger, much more dangerous. And oh yeah, let's not forget he got shot during that whole kidnapping thing.
No, that's right.
But even injured, he managed to escape with Shalyn.
What a story.
Talk about resilience, but also maybe a bit reckless.
Maybe just a tad.
It's like he thrives on this chaos. But why? What's he really after? Is it just about uncovering the secrets of this Project T? Or is there something more to it?
That's the big question, isn't it? On the surface, it might seem like scientific curiosity. Maybe he sees himself as a protector of knowledge, of scientific integrity.
So his pursuit of Project T is less about the technology and more about exposing the people behind it, the ones who are corrupting it.
Right. And it is a pretty fascinating theory.
So he's not just a scientist caught up in some conspiracy. He's become this, symbol of resistance, fighting against those who would exploit science for their own gain.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's like he's driven to expose the truth no matter what. And it's not just finding the answers. He wants to make sure they're used for the right reasons. Right. So Marcos isn't just different from the people who want to exploit science. He's also different from the scientists who are doing things the right way. He's like an outlier.
Definitely. He's not content with just studying these amazing creatures. He feels this responsibility to protect them and protect the knowledge that comes with them.
Okay, so let's bring it all back to his objective. What's he really trying to achieve?
I think it's got multiple layers, you know. On one hand, he's got this endless curiosity. He always wants to know more, push the boundaries of paleontology.
Right.
But there's this deeper level, too. It's about justice, about exposing the people who are working in the shadows, safeguarding science itself.
So he's become this champion for doing science the right way, even if it means breaking the rules.
Exactly. He's going rogue for a good cause.
It's kind of like he's this modern-day knight. But instead of fighting with weapons, he's fighting with his brain and this constant search for the truth.
I like that. And, you know, even with all the danger and seriousness, he still manages to keep his sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, there were a few of those moments in the sources that made me laugh out loud.
Remember when he compared his colleague's diving suit to a giant Mikado stick?
Yeah. It shows that he doesn't let the danger completely consume him, right? He finds a way to stay lighthearted.
It definitely makes him more human, more relatable, even with all this extraordinary stuff going on.
So where does this leave us with Marcos Shannon? Who is he really?
I think he represents the true spirit of exploration. But it's not just about observing, it's about taking action, about protecting and exposing. He reminds us that knowledge is power, but we have to use it responsibly, for the good of everyone.
He's not perfect, that's for sure. He can be impulsive, reckless, driven by his emotions. But he's also brave, compassionate, and completely dedicated to justice.
He's a reminder that one person can really make a difference, even when the odds are stacked against them.
He's a bit rough around the edges, that's for sure. But there's something about him, a real sense of integrity, I think.
Oh, absolutely. He wants to do what's right, even if it means going against the grain, even if it means getting into trouble.
He challenges authority, stands up for what he believes in. He's willing to put himself at risk for those he cares about.
And that compassion really comes through, especially in his relationship with Shannon.
Right, even with all their bickering, their conflicting goals, he clearly cares about her.
He wants to protect her, especially from those who would try to exploit her connection to Project T.
It's that mix of contradictions that makes him so interesting, I think. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes, but he keeps fighting.
And that makes him relatable, right? We see bits of ourselves in him, in his struggles, his flaws, his determination. We root for him, even when we don't always agree with his methods.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I have to admit, I'm kind of in awe of Marcos, even with all his flaws.
Me too. He's a character that sticks with you, makes you think, and maybe even inspires you to find a little bit of that rebellious spirit in yourself.
I love that. We could all use a little bit of Marcos in our lives. That willingness to question, to challenge, to fight for what's right, even if it means stepping outside of our comfort zones.
Absolutely.
So, to everyone listening, what did you find most interesting about Marcos Shannon? What can we learn from his crazy adventures? Think about that as you explore these sources for yourselves. And until next time, keep diving deep.